wanted to pick up on presumably accuracy. Microphone, please. Somebody up on there?
I'll shout if you like.
Yeah, I think we'll hear you.
Could I just correct the amounts of money being paid? According to the 2007 Transport White Paper, a long time ago I suppose, the railway industry's income is about 10 billion. Half of that comes from the fare box, half of that from government. The aim is to increase the fare payers' contribution to 75%. But in thinking about fares, which we think are high, we should not overlook the fact that 3.4 billion a year goes to Network Rail from the taxpayer as a direct grant. So if you actually it is at the moment 50-50, and it is going to 75%, hopefully, paid by the fare payer. Those are the statistics from the white paper.
As always helpful.
Yes, okay. Anybody else want to give a mash away about fares? Yeah, sorry, I'm good. Let's Alan have his piece before you wrap up his piece.
Basic sort of line is that we want fares to be simple and affordable. We need to get people out of cars and planes and onto the trains, and it's a carrot and stick approach. The carrot is to scrap the RPI+1 formula, which is making the fares go up in real terms every year. That's on the regulated ones. The unregulated ones often go up by far more than that. And that's making train travel less attractive. So it's going to mean some sticks on the other modes, aviation and motoring, where they currently do not pay their full costs, in terms of carbon emissions, all other pollutants, accidents and so on when it comes to the road network. So they are going to have to pay their full costs, which will increase the cost of motoring and aviation. And we want rail fares to come down considerably, possibly by a third, something like that, to get them down to the sort of level that we find on continental Europe, where people are happy to use the trains far more. And the other thing is that we need to simplify things. The London Midland is my local top. They, in January this year, put a ban on cheap fare returns being used out of Euston between 4:45 and 6:45 in Euston peak in order to try and reduce overcrowding. But an article in the Rail magazine last week pointed out that in fact you can, if you've got a travel card, use a train out of Euston in that period, as long as it stops at Harrow and Wealdstone on its way. Because the travel card bit gets you from Euston to Harrow and Wealdstone, which has no restriction on it, and you'll get you to Milton Keynes or Northampton or wherever on the rest of your ticket. So nowadays, when somebody wants to look, they've got to think, now, does the train stop at Harrow and Wealdstone? Is there another one that does stop there that I can change on to a further train at Watford, for example? Or is it a train I can't use at all? It's absurdly complex, and it's all about the tops, just trying to screw more money out of the passengers. And that really should be stopped.
Right, okay. Yes, you do.
Two quick comments.
You need the microphone. I think you gave up the microphone. Please, this is David Shipley from CSRE.
Two quick comments on Norman Baker's point regarding. Sorry, let me pick up on Francis' point first. Alan, you're not going to be able to reduce. No government is going to be able to reduce train fares until they provide more capacity and more trains to do it with.
Yep.
So, it's all about yield management at the moment. I've forgotten all the points.
Did you have a question?
No.
All right,
No.
okay. Do you want to come? Yes, please. Microphone in the middle of the room.
Thank you. Graham Smith from Albany Smith Management. One way of addressing the taxpayer, fare payer balance is by reducing the cost of the railway, making it more efficient. Does the panel believe that it is solely the responsibility of Network Rail to improve the efficiency of the railway system?
Right, good question. Why don't we, Alan, would you mind to start us on this one?
I think the problem with the costs of the railways in this country and the system we had for the last 15 years is the privatisation, which has made it dysfunctional and very expensive. In order to do anything, you now need an army of lawyers, accountants, consultants, when we had, I mean, BR wasn't perfect, I'm not claiming it was, but at least it was one coherent organisation. You either liked what it did or it didn't. But it's privatisation has vastly increased the costs, 2-3 times what the cost of doing the equivalent thing of a continental railway. I'm sure Roger Ford will give us the exact ratio these days. But so that's my answer to how to get the costs down, is to reintegrate it, take it back into public ownership, and then the cost would come down. Sorry, some lawyers and accountants might be out of pocket, and some shareholders, but the passengers would benefit.
Right, okay. Remember that the question was about the whether network rail were the people to drive the efficiencies.
Well, they do have to drive efficiencies. They're the predominant force for driving efficiencies because they've got far more of a budget than individual train operating companies do, and I think we have to recognise that. They also seem to me to be less efficient than train companies, which have been driven by either by very tight franchises or by the profit motive, whereas Network Rail as a monopoly supplier without an obvious competitor or even comparator hasn't had that stricture, and indeed of course inherited the basket case that was Railtrack, created by the Conservative government. So Network Rail is a primary objective, I think, for those of us who want to see money saved from the railway, but it isn't to say it's the only one. I'm in favour, for example, we were the first party to promote longer franchises, and our vision of longer franchises would eliminate the wheelbarrows full of legal materials come down the track every 5 or 6 years for individual train companies, and replace it with a longer franchise. Now, and I also think if you change the nature of the franchise to one which is 15 to 20 years, then what you can do by that is you can change the nature of the franchise so it becomes passenger orientated, so that the top that wins the franchise keeps its franchise throughout, provided that at certain points throughout it's meeting passenger orientated targets, not treasury orientated targets, passenger orientated targets. And then you start getting some of the efficiency, I think, which you need to see in that. It's interesting, the East Coast Main Line has lost 2 train companies because they didn't meet treasury targets in terms of the money. But when it came to First Great Western, which was having a rough time, or First Capital Connect, which has been very, very good, not meeting passenger aspirations, they've been allowed to keep their franchise.
Right, okay. Stephen Hammond.
Well, I could start my normal end with it, and we'll take it. There are all sorts of reasons we may tackle that in a moment. But let's go back to the question. And actually, one of the good things the Conservative Party policy has made in terms of if you don't do well, the government follows you and claims it as their own. The Liberal Party claimed they were the first to think of it. So,
We were.
I can't remember why they done it, but that's in most of those cases, it's always amusing to watch that happen. In terms of efficiency, clearly Network Rail has to be the driver to the efficiency gains. They have a privileged position within the railway industry. They are a monopoly and an obsolescence. And therefore there is a driving force on them on cost, but there is a wider challenge to us all. We have confronted the direct challenge in our rail report by looking at some of the adjustments that could be done in terms of the network code, and the closer working with TOCs to ensure that we can see the responsiveness from the company. Clearly they are subject to a 5-year review from the ORR, and that is using international comparisons. But it's not just Network Rail. Clearly, the wider responsibility is on what has been pointed out by HS2, which is this huge, since this government's been in power, huge increase in costs in all civil projects. It's not just the railway industry. And we really need to get a very firm grip on why costs have driven up so much over the last 13 years and start driving those down again so that major projects can be delivered in a better, more costly manner. And secondly, I do think that it is right, one of the benefits of longer franchises will allow some more flexibility, and I know it has already started in a small way, but the possibility of direct testability for certain enhancement projects against Network Rail is a way for them to prove either their costs are right or for the overall cost of the industry to be driven down. And so I think it is not only the responsibility of Network Rail, they will sit at the key of the industry at the moment, if they are the monopoly and the monopolist, but it's also the responsibility of government in terms of some of the other levers that can be opened up so that direct competition and direct cost competition can apply.
Chris Moll, could you answer the question? And also this business about longer franchises.